George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The rain in Spain falls mainly on the King and the Prime Minister. A visit to Valencia where hundreds of people were killed in floods in Spain, in the garden, ended in farce with the King and the Prime Minister being pelted by the populace. Is it the end for the Bourbons? And what about the Hohenzollerns or Hanoverians or Saxe-Coburgians or whatever our lot call themselves today? Thanks to Channel 4 dispatches, our demand for a referendum on the continuation of monarchy in Britain has never been stronger. And speaking of monarchs, who will be the king of the heap in Washington? Well, Donald Trump wants to visit Tehran to bring about peace in the Middle East. He's already declared it'll be the end of the war in Ukraine. Is that the reason why the betting markets and the polls have suddenly turned against him? It's either a psyop or they're fixing to fix it. Oh, and the world waits with bated breath on Iran's response to Israeli aggression against their country. It might even come tonight, maybe even when we are on the air. Somebody called Kimi Badenoch has been elected of something called the Conservative Party's new leader. I don't know either. Who cares? But fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night because this is the big one. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It was said of the Bourbons that they learnt nothing and forgot nothing. That was just before they came to a sticky end in Paris in the 1790s. Well, the Bourbons are back in the throne on Spain, and they made a very big blunder today. After the people of Valencia have been voicing their rage for more than a week after catastrophic flooding, killed hundreds of people, in Valencia, in Spain, in Joseph Borrell's garden. The king rolled up in his limousine, but he didn't take account of the attitude of the angry populace who pelted him, and he had to make a very rapid exit indeed. Undignified, to be sure, begging the question why Spain bothered reinstating a monarch in the first place. Spain ought to be a republic. Spain ought to be a decentralized republic. Spain ought to be a model of democracy, not a returned autocracy. But the British royal family are in even deeper trouble. They have been caught by the Channel 4 dispatches program, fleecing their own people. I'm not talking about the civil list allocations. We all know about that, and we all know how expensive all that is. No, I'm talking about the income that the royal family have been secretly and tax-free amassing from the duchies of Cornwall and of Lancaster. I'm talking about King Charles, but I'm also talking about his heir apparent, Prince William. These two have been secretly fleecing not just their own tenants. And by the way, Prince William is currently fronting a campaign against homelessness. And the documentary has revealed that he himself is a slum landlord with hundreds and hundreds of tenants paying him millions and millions of pounds per year and endlessly complaining in vain about the cold, drafty, moulded houses that they are living in. I'm talking about a king and an heir apparent who charge rent to the National Health Service for land that they own. They only own it because their ancestors stole it on the point of a sword or through illicit coupling on the wrong side of the blanket. That's how they own it. But they are garnering hundreds of millions of pounds from charging rent, not just on the NHS, but on their own Army, Navy, and Air Force. That's right. It's His Majesty's Navy, Army, Air Force. But His Majesty is charging his own army rent. And I'm talking big, big rents. Sounds like something that Milo Minderberger might have come up with in the pages of Catch 22. And worst of all, it's all not only untaxed, it is all completely secret. Or at least it was until now. We now realize why these Hohenzollerns, or whatever they call themselves these days, are amongst the richest people on the entire planet. Are they worth it? Well, take a look at them. Are they worth it? Well, examine their personal conduct over the last few decades. In fact, make that over the last few centuries. Examine the qualities, a little less than Olympian, that they demonstrate on a daily basis. But my God, are they coining it. My good friend Norman Baker, former Liberal Democrat MP and minister, wrote a book, in fact 2 books about them, but nobody paid enough attention. And now Channel 4's Dispatches has burst like an explosion on the British political and public relations scene. So we'll be pressing home our demand, which we made before the death of the late Queen Elizabeth, that when Queen Elizabeth passed, all bets were off as far as we were concerned, and we were going to campaign for a referendum on the continuation of the monarchy. Maybe they'll do the same in Spain too. Of course, the biggest story in the world right now is who is going to be the king of the heap in Washington, D.C. All the betting markets and all the polls showed a landslide victory in the Electoral College for Donald Trump, and maybe even a victory in the popular vote. But before she appeared on Saturday Night Live, the betting markets and the polls began to change. Now that might be manipulation, a kind of psyop to depress expectation, to depress the enthusiasm of Donald Trump's supporters, or it may be that they're fixing to fix it. I know where my money is. We've got a poll running tonight. Overwhelmingly, people think Donald Trump is going to win. And maybe he will, but maybe he won't. And if he doesn't, either fairly or unfairly, I'm willing to bet that these are the reasons. In the last 48 hours, Donald Trump has said that he's prepared to go to Tehran to bring about peace in the Middle East. He's gone to Dearborn, Michigan, and told an enthusiastic crowd of formerly very unenthusiastic Arab Americans for the Republican Party that the war in Gaza must stop now. And he's told Netanyahu that it better all be over by the time he comes to office in January, should he win. And he's been saying for years that he will bring the Ukrainian war to an end even before he takes office in January. He will stop the war. And the president of Russia just this week said they take President Trump's plan for peace seriously, and they support it. So the possibility, that's all, of peace in the Ukraine, of peace in the Middle East, of no war between the United States and Iran, is tantalizingly like a harvest moon suddenly in vision. Cue, all the pundits are beginning to predict a Kamala Harris victory. What would that mean? Well, it will mean many things for the American people themselves, but that's their business. What it will mean for the world is World War III. What it will mean for the world is a doubling down of American support for the Zelensky regime in Kiev and a doubling down in armed, bristling hostility between the United States and Russia. What it will mean is a continuation of the total support for Netanyahu's slaughter, genocidal frenzy, both in Gaza and in the Lebanon. What it will mean is war between the United States and Iran. Of course, the opposite isn't guaranteed if Donald Trump wins, but it's guaranteed to happen if Kamala Harris wins. That's the reason I said to you on Wednesday, whatever you do in this election, don't vote Harris. Vote for anybody you like. Donald Trump, Dr. JillStein, as I would, Cornel West, Uncle Tom Cobley, anybody at all. But don't vote for Harris, because if you do, you are rewarding genocide. And if you reward genocide, the blood from that genocide will stain your fingers forever. Don't put a cross opposite mass murder, opposite genocide. Now, the situation that we have in the Persian Gulf is very finely balanced. I expected yesterday the Iranian response, a response to which they are both legally and morally entitled. Any country, after all, has the right to defend itself. It has the right to defend itself when another country attacks it. Israel has, by their own announcements, attacked Iran 3 times and has declared they intend to attack for a 4th time. Iran has responded only twice. You really don't need to be a mathematics scholar to realize that this score is uneven and that therefore Iran has every legal and moral right to respond for a 3rd time. Iran has said that it intends its 3rd response to be so devastating as to create a new political reality in the region, to not only establish deterrence, but to establish supremacy. Of course, Israel will always have its hundreds of nuclear weapons, but if it used them, it would be not just the end of the entire region, including all of America's favorite sons in the Persian Gulf, but it would be the end of the world, because no superpower allied to Iran is going to allow Iran to be nuclear annihilated by an upstart state of 8 million people, which is behaving ever more out of control. The mass murder in Gaza almost leaves me short of words. The horror, the unmitigated obscenity with which we are treated on our own telephones in real time really scarcely bears repeating here. But their massacres in Lebanon are getting hardly any coverage at all. They're on a full-fledged, full-court press regime change operation in the Lebanon. They hope to pulverize the Lebanese resistance in the south and to maneuver for a regime change coup d'etat at the center in Beirut. And they have some willing dancers at the ball. But the entire thing is openly being coordinated by the American ambassador in Beirut. It's like a throwback to Latin America in the 1950s, where the ambassador is openly on the television and to the newspapers, openly instructing the Lebanese government what they must do, threatening them with sanctions and promising them American support if they will follow American diktat. And that diktat is to effectively make Lebanon an Israeli protectorate, balkanized into ethno-religious statelets, a Christian state, a Sunni state, a Druze state, a Shiite state, but a Shiite state tamed and controlled by Israel. Lebanon's never seen anything quite like it. And I am puzzled because I know Lebanon so well. There is no people in the world who are more proudly, patriotically attached to their country. Lebanese for them is something very, very special indeed. Many of them deny even that they are Arabs. They're Phoenicians or Canaanites or any other kind of ites. Everything that's any good in the world was invented by them. Everybody you see on the television, they'll tell you that that person has a 37th cousin, 15 times removed, who is Lebanese. They are patriotic to the point of chauvinistic, and yet they're allowing an American woman openly to dictate to them on their television, in their parliament, openly to give them orders. I've never seen anything like it. Are there no men left in Beirut? Are there no men left whose amour propre, they like a bit of French, in Lebanon, whose amour propre is offended by this jumped up little American foreigner, a woman ordering them around, telling them what government they have to have, who can be in it, who cannot be in it? What kind of Lebanese are you? Who would want to say that they were Lebanese, given the current performance in Beirut, but not, of course, in the south, where the London Times reported this week. And let me tell the British government, this is the London Times speaking. It is not me that's speaking. I'm not glorifying anybody or anything, Mr. Starmer. Call off your dogs. In the London Times, an Israeli army officer is quoted as saying this: the Lebanese Hezbollah are the best of the best. The Lebanese Hezbollah are the cream of the cream. That's the London Times, quoting an Israeli army officer who has watched the Hezbollah go toe-to-toe with the finest outfits of the Israeli superpower army and give it, to coin a phrase, a bloody good hiding. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I have never met anybody who was a member of Hezbollah. To the best of my knowledge, that's the truth. They are not in need of my glorification. Their own people regard them as glorious enough, and their enemies on the battlefield are ready to acknowledge that they are glorious enough. Somebody called Badenoch, a black woman we're supposed to celebrate, even though she is a rabid reactionary, red in tooth and claw, salivating with hatred for people her own color in our country or on the dinghies headed towards us. A woman so savage in her political outlook that she makes Margaret Thatcher look like Snow White. Badenoch. Don't remember her name. She probably won't be around for long. So, the poll is this: who will win, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? You can say on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, listen, I am so close to 500,000 subscribers. Well, I can only ask you again, if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, It will cost you absolutely nothing. Please do it now. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, why don't you tell all your friends and contacts that I'm on air, that the subjects are big, that the guests are great, and that the calls are pretty sharp too. They should be joining us. It's the mother of all talk shows. China is the one that is doing what ought to have been done from the start. You and I both know there are some things that are too important to the people, the nation, the country, to be left to the private sector, and there are some things too specialized that are too important to people's ordinary lives to be given over to the state, as I always put it. Have you ever seen anyone happy with a haircut from a state barber, or a suit tailored by a state tailor, or a great meal being served in a state canteen? There are all kinds of things that are better left to the private sector, but there are all kinds of things that are too important to be left to the private sector. And that synthesis of public and private, that mixed economy, that common sense socialism is what we in the Workers' Party of Britain fight for our own country. Every country has the right, of course, to its own path, and Russia has the right to its. I'm only interested in Russia nowadays in as much as Russia is playing the leading role in stopping the spread of American hegemony, stopping the unipolar tyranny of United States rule. Of course, because I love Russia, I particularly want Russia to do well. I want Russians to do well. But what kind of government they have is a matter only for them.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So our first guest this evening will be Professor Seyed Mohammed Marandi, the Chair of American Studies and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. But first, let's take a couple of calls. Lucy is in New York on the US elections. Go ahead, Lucy. We haven't got Lucy, so let me recap on the poll. Who will win, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? It's really not rocket science. You pick one. Don't bother saying, you know, it should have been this person or it should have been that. That is the main choice on the ballot paper. Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Who will win? You can vote for 16% say Harris, 22% say Harris, 18% say Harris, 19% say Harris, 84%, 78%, 82%, and 81% say Trump. That is, of course, the kind of result that was being routinely predicted by the betting markets and the opinion polls over the last few weeks. And it looked like it was going to be a landslide. Suddenly, we're not so sure. Now, Professor Seyed Mohammed Marandi is on the line. Seyed Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us, as always, on the mother of all talk shows. Before I ask you about the obvious, President Donald Trump said that if elected, he's ready to come to Tehran to talk about peace in the Middle East. That's quite a dramatic development, isn't it? Would you welcome him?
Well, he is the person who murdered General Soleimani, who led the war against ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria and Iraq. And I don't think anyone in Iran is ever going to forget what he's done to the Iranian people and the threats that he made and the maximum pressure sanctions that he's imposed upon the nation to crush the economy, to harm children, to kill people, basically. So I don't think anyone is going to welcome him or Harris in Tehran. Harris, of course, is a part of an administration that's carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza. There's a conspiracy of silence in the Western media as Palestinians in northern Gaza are being wiped out by the Israeli regime. So I don't think either of the two presidential candidates will be welcome in Iran if one of them becomes president. But if the United States chooses to change its behavior towards Iran, obviously Iran will take note of that. Iran has no hostility towards the American people. It has no hostility towards the people in the UK or any nation across Europe. Iran's problem has been imperialism, colonialism, hegemony, and of course, apartheid and ethnic cleansing in Palestine. I think the biggest problem with Trump is that he's impulsive. One day he says one thing, the next day he says another. But I think the reality on the ground is changing. The United States, whether it's going to be Harris or Trump, I think they're recognizing that the Israeli regime today is much weaker than it's ever been before. If we look at the battlefield in the exchange between Iran and the Israeli regime, regardless of what claims are made by Tehran or the Israeli regime, I think it's clear that the Iranian strikes against the Israelis were more potent. That's what the images show. And the Israelis who said that they're going to hit Iran so hard that Iran will not know what happened, I don't think anyone felt that was actually what took place. And therefore, in the exchange with Iran, the Israeli regime came short. In the battle over Lebanon, besides killing women and children, they failed on the border between Palestine and Lebanon. And in Gaza, they failed as well. Remember, we have to always remember that once upon a time, you remember this better than I. It was when I was a child. Israelis would go all the way and cross the Sinai to the Suez Canal, whereas now they can't take a dot on the map called Gaza. In 1982, which I remember much better, the Israelis went all the way to Beirut in 4 or 5 days. Now they're stuck on the border. There were heavy battles in Al-Khiyam, which I'm sure you visited, the notorious prison in Al-Khiyam where they used to rape Lebanese prisoners. One of the prisoners, he told me that they raped his wife in front of him to get a confession, to get him to confess. He was a member of the resistance, and very interestingly, the person who raped his wife was Lebanese. And after the liberation of southern Lebanon in 2000, Seyed Hassan Nasrallah asked the people of the resistance not to retaliate. So the person who raped his wife on behalf of the Israelis continues to live in Lebanon today without being harassed. I thought this is an important footnote for people to know what sort of people Hezbollah are, what sort of organization this is, how much restraint they have, how much self-control they have in order to preserve the unity of Lebanon. But in any case, back then, they went all the way to Beirut. Now they're stuck on the border. 3 days of battle in Khiyam. The result was the Israeli regime retreated back to the border. So this is not the Israeli regime of 2-3 decades past, and the resistance today is much stronger. And I think the United States recognizes this. Although I have no illusions about the regime in Washington, I do not think they've learned any lessons, but I think they're beginning to understand that the situation in Palestine, like in Ukraine, is not going well.
Now, Professor, you and others have been predicting the now long-awaited Iranian response. When will we see it, and what form is it likely to take in your view?
I don't know about the date. I don't think it's far off, but I think, George, that it's going to be probably more consequential than the previous strike because of what the leader said, what Ayatollah Khamenei said. My understanding is that it's going to be more painful for the regime. I don't know in what way, but from the wording in his speech, that is my understanding. And as you know, the Iranians have a legitimate right to strike. The Israeli regime carried out aggression, even though it did fail by and large. They were not able to destroy anything significant in Iran. They damaged a number of radar bits and pieces of radar installations, but they weren't able to cause the sort of damage that they were claiming to do. But still, it was an act of aggression. And since the Israelis initiated this conflict, they began with the bombing of the embassy. Iran responded to that. Then they murdered Ismail Haniyeh. He was martyred in Tehran when he was a guest of the president. And then Iran responded to that. So the Israeli attack on Iran was another escalation. And Iran will respond to that escalation to create deterrence so that the regime learns not to do this again. The Israeli regime has the full support of the West, George. When the Iranians know quite well, when the Americans and the Europeans allow the regime to carry out genocide, to carry out a Holocaust in Gaza, and to exterminate the Palestinians in northern Gaza as we speak, they're not going to force him to refrain from attacking Iran. And so the Iranians know that if they do not strike the Israeli regime, that will only encourage Netanyahu. He will see it as a sign of weakness. It will only encourage him to strike Iran again in future. So Iran feels that it has to hit the regime hard, both to punish it, to create deterrence, but also to strengthen the resistance that is fighting this regime in Gaza and in Lebanon.
Well, the president of Iran said that he called on Netanyahu to stop the war, to accept the ceasefire, and the Iranian response would not be as painful as it was going to be. That, I presume, has fallen on deaf ears. In fact, the Israeli cabinet has already decided upon a fourth attack on Iran in response to a rocket fired by a third party in Lebanon. So we're a long way short of deterrence. I suppose what some of the audience will be asking, why doesn't Iran hit them so hard that they will never attack Iran again, and hit them so hard that they'll have to stop slaughtering the women and children in the north of Gaza? If you have the capability of doing that, why not use it?
Well, I think that Operation True Promise 3, the upcoming operation, will, as I said earlier, be very harsh. And what President Pezeshkian said was basically to show the international community and the global majority in particular, not the West. The West is very much in bed with the Zionist regime. But to show the global majority and the people of the region that our priority is to end the genocide. And if the Israeli regime accept, and we know they're not going to accept, but if they accept the terms set by Hamas and the terms that the Americans themselves put forward months ago, if they accept that will have an impact. If there is a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza, that will have an impact. It won't stop Iran's retaliation, but it will have an impact. But if they don't, then the Iranian response will be much more severe. So I think Iran is speaking to the global majority. Also, I think that Iran is escalating. If you compare True Promise 1 with True Promise 2, and what I think will be coming shortly, I think we are seeing Iran escalating. But Iran also wants to make sure that countries across the world, which are focused on the Israeli regime, that they do not start criticizing Iran. because you know very well how the Americans and the Europeans, their best weapon has always been media manipulation, and soft power. And Iran doesn't want to give them the opportunity to turn the tables and suddenly blame the resistance. So if Iran, out of the blue, hit the Israeli regime extremely hard, let's say, during Operation True Promise 1 or 2, then some countries may have turned around and said, you're escalating. So Iran has gradually been hitting harder, but I think that this time round, the Israelis will be hit even harder than last time, and I think it will have an impact. George, I think your listeners and viewers also have to keep in mind that the defense capabilities in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, these are all being funded and supported by Iran. It's not just about missiles. As we speak, Gaza, they've been able to resist for over a year because of Iran's support. As we speak, Iran continues to support Gaza. As we speak, Iran continues to support the resistance across the board. So it's basically Iran and this axis of resistance against 40 Western regimes. And unfortunately, Turkey is doing more for Israel than it is for the Palestinians, Jordan the same, the Emirates, Egypt, Morocco. It is a very heavy burden on the axis of resistance, but I have no doubt that the Israeli regime will be defeated, the resistance will win. We saw when the West was saying that Hezbollah is in deep trouble, they won't be able to defend themselves. We saw Hezbollah was steadfast, and they will continue to defeat the regime on the border. Hamas will continue to hold their ground, and without a doubt, the Iranians will hit the regime very hard.
Finally, Professor, of course, every nation has its collaborators. We were fortunate that Hitler never made it here, or else we'd know exactly who would have collaborated with him. You mentioned some of the other Arab countries and the collaborating role that they are playing. What about the situation in Lebanon now? I don't know if you heard my somewhat angry monologue at the beginning. We have a situation now where the Lebanese, as patriotic a people as exist on the earth, are tolerating in Beirut an American woman ambassador who is literally telling them what to do, what they must do, what they cannot do, who they can have in their government, who they must not have in their government, who they can fly on their own national airline, and who they cannot fly. This is a quite extraordinary level of treachery, is it not?
Absolutely. They're also telling the Iraqi government what sort of aid it can send to Lebanon and how it can send it to Lebanon. The Americans are trying to surround Lebanon. They're trying to prevent aid from getting in. They want people to suffer, but also the Americans and the Western embassies collectively and NGOs, Western NGOs, they are trying to create a civil war in Lebanon. You know, again, better than I, the Lebanese forces, what role they played in the past. In 1982, when the Israeli regime invaded Lebanon, they collaborated with the regime, Samir Ja'ja. They were the ones who carried out, along with the Israelis, the massacre in the Sabra Shatila Palestinian refugee camp, where up to 4,000 people were slaughtered in less than 48 hours. These same people right now in Lebanon are allies of Western embassies. They're allies of this lady. And they are working together to create division and instability in Lebanon. So refugees are being harassed. Aid is being prevented from getting in. The U.S. Embassy is dictating who can get on a plane and who cannot get on a plane. It is quite extraordinary. And this is something that I think that your viewers will appreciate. By knowing this, they will better appreciate the sacrifices that Hezbollah made. some people were saying on October the 8th last year, why didn't Hezbollah go all in? The reason is because Lebanon is a fragmented country, and the West, the United States, have always been manipulating the country. And if Hezbollah pushed too far, then the U.S. would have been able to use these forces that are allied with it to create division in Lebanon and, God forbid, bring about civil war, something that we're always afraid of. Hezbollah was very careful to keep the battle on the border. They made extra sacrifices as a result. They lost more men as a result, but other Lebanese were spared from the fighting. And that is what gradually created a greater consensus in Lebanon. And now the overwhelming majority support the resistance among all the different groups. I don't want to name them, but all of them more or less support the resistance. And that is because Hezbollah was very careful about how to escalate over the last year and how to fight the Israeli regime. But the Americans are conspiring, the Europeans are conspiring, but they will fail. I have no doubt that Hezbollah will play the key role in preventing the genocide in Gaza from reaching the conclusion that Netanyahu and his allies want.
Professor Marandi, thank you as always for joining us. I suspect we'll have to talk again soon enough, and I'm grateful to you always for joining us.
Thank you.
Professor Seyed Mohammed Marandi, the Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Quick break, then it's your calls all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. Well, first of all, Bob Geldof and his good friend Bono are on the other side. It wasn't for South Africa, it was for the Horn of Africa. I was involved in it at the time. That was my job at the time. And there were many differences. First of all, it was easy because of Cold War politics to take a stand on the famine in sub-Saharan Africa in 1984-85. I did so myself, but it was easy to do. There was no Ethiopian lobby smearing you as an anti-Ethiopian racist if you got involved in it. There was absolutely gale force wind of free publicity from the newspapers and the television about the famine in Africa at that time. There is zero publicity in the mainstream media about the calvary being undergone by the Palestinian people in 2024. Thirdly, the artists involved lost nothing and arguably gained much by being involved in that charitable enterprise. Artists today lining up for Palestine, like the great Eric Clapton, like the great Roger Waters, and I'm running out of names already, would not only not be benefiting from putting on a Live Aid for Palestine, their careers would be destroyed, would be brought to a shuddering halt if they did. So I'm afraid none of the conditions which made possible the Live Aid phenomenon exist over Palestine. Indeed, quite the contrary.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Who will win on Tuesday, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Get your vote in on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. 18,000 of you have voted so far. If you want to call the show, here are the numbers. It's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It is free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Let's take our first call of the evening. It's from the aforementioned Lucy in New York. Lucy, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you? My name is Lucy. I'm calling from New York City. I wanted to mention the fact that Kamala Harris, I don't know if you've seen some of the latest episodes that she's done on Charlemagne and some other shows, but she's actually been lifting bits and pieces of my campaign, my local campaign against AOC, which you can see on lucycan.com. She's been lifting ideas off of it, such as a new GI Bill for Black Americans. She's been copying the material. So the Democratic Party, what they've always done is they lift ideas off of these grassroots movements, right? The way AOC did with her Green New Deal for public housing, which was that actually became the Green New Dump for public housing, which was lifted off of the Green Party. And basically what AOC has been doing is she's been lifting ideas off of grassroots movements, off of the Green Party, and Kamala Harris is now doing the same thing with my local write-in campaign. And I just want to say, on behalf of a lot of Americans, these house slaves in the Democratic Party, people like AOC, we have to get rid of them right away. We have to get rid of them. I don't really care who replaces them. At this point, my campaign has become just kind of like a fuck you vote for AOC. But these house slaves, these progressives in the Democratic Party, so-called progressives, are a big part of the problem. And it's basically, I really think, even though I don't think that voting for a third party will fix everything, I do think we have to punish Kamala Harris. We have to punish AOC. And I'm really happy that your show has been on the air for so long, and I really appreciated your roast of the British royal family today as well, George.
Thank you, Lucy, in New York, and good luck on Tuesday. I wouldn't worry about her stealing your ideas, because they've definitely got no intention of implementing them. Now look, on a new development, you can scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Keep it clean and we'll read it out on the air. So I think it's Bindi Boxer says Trump is full of lies. He will bomb Iran if he becomes president. We are doomed either way. Both Harris and Trump are liars. And Kevin McKee said B-52s in Qatar. Is the US dumb enough to use them? And Emoji says as long as world leaders believe it to be political suicide to go against AIPAC, the madness will continue. I voted Green to help make facilitating genocide politically suicidal. And Roger Asai says poll buying into the MSM-backed propaganda that the race is only between these two. If either of them wins, America loses. Sure, but there's no substitute for persuading America of that. Just shouting it out or sending it as a tweet isn't going to cut it. Jack Klugman, great name, says one thing about Trumpenstein: he knows the public mood shift, that they are tired of seeing kids put in bags in Gaza. Yeah, I was going to make that point, Jack, to Professor Marandi. The fact that Trump has changed his emphasis in the last 48 hours either means he really means it, and I understand the skepticism about that, or it means that he's read the wind. He's realized that there's votes in it to call for an end to these wars. That seems to me obvious. Irene, too, says in Iran there's a law as stipulated in the Quran. You can ask for justice for a murderer, but the family can also choose to forgive the criminal. I don't know another country like that. Okay, that's the first time I've done that, reading directly the quotes on YouTube, but you'll need to scan the QR code in order to make it onto the air. Dave is on the line in Oregon. Dave, what would you like to say?
Yes, thank you, George. Thank you for your inspiration. We're on our way to a Palestine protest, and I wanted to mention that I read in the Associated Press that the U.S. spent $23 billion in the year ending October 7th, 2024. $23 billion in Gaza, in Israel and Gaza. And I did a rough calculation. I said there's been 40 to 50,000 people murdered in Gaza. And if you do the math, it comes out that the American taxpayer has been paying $500,000 to kill people in Gaza. That's $500,000 for each dead person in Gaza. And it's an incredible number.
Incredible.
We think that Israel is killing the people, but it's actually the deep-pocketed American taxpayer.
Yeah, the masters of war that Dylan spoke about, sang about 60 years ago are the same masters of war who are profiting from it now. But Dave, can you imagine if the US government had to go door to door and say to each American family, you have to give us a few $1,000s out of this house so we can send it to Israel to help them to kill people? Can you imagine the response of the average American taxpayer? They're lucky they don't have to do it that way. Thanks, Dave, in Oregon. Mormon is in Detroit on the IDF. Go ahead, Mormon.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. I'm honored to be on your show one more time. I'm calling from Dearborn here in Michigan, where you often hear a lot of things that have been going on. I called before and I mentioned that the topic of rape is absolutely taboo in the Muslim religion, in Islam. And this stuff that's being exposed has been going on for decades. Rape by dogs, electrical instruments, and rape to death. It's been going on forever, but nobody wants to talk about it. This is something a Muslim woman never wants to say happened to her. And then on the other hand, if people out there remember, way back in August 2009, Sweden's largest daily called Aftonbladet published an article by a journalist named Donald Bostrom, where he detailed how they were stealing organs out of live Palestinians, who most of the times, of course, died due to, depending on what organ was stolen out of his body. And he had actually written a book in 2001 detailing this, and it took forever for this to become exposed and to become public knowledge. And then finally, Israel, after denying it for decades, had to admit it. They were forced to admit it because the doctors themselves came forward and said, yes, we're doing this. And the government finally said, well, so what? We don't have any laws against organ theft, so we're going to keep on doing it. And they still do it to this day. But now I'm hearing something even more alarming, and it amazes me, and it's hard to believe. But I've heard it twice now in the past couple of weeks from two different people completely. I don't even believe they know each other. And they've told me the same thing. What's going on now is something beyond contempt. It's something that's so ugly, that's so vile. They are actually telling me that they are hunting Palestinian men, that they're putting a price on their head and using them like game. And I thought, how absurd. Who would do this? And then you realize that you've been watching through the drone films, them doing exactly that. All they're doing now is monetizing it, saying, well, we're going to charge you $1 million, and these rich, Zionists can come out from the United States and hunt a Palestinian to death, And, of course, they tell me that they put the price very small on their head, sometimes like $10,000, because you know how the Zionists want to say that the Palestinian life is not worth much. So this is one of their ways of doing it. So it might, while they say, well, the price is $1 million, they actually do it for much, much less. So that when you think about this and when you think about what you see...
horrifying stories indeed, Mormon. I can't vouch for them all myself, but you have aired your take on the matter, and it was important that we heard you. Now look on the podcast, it's been another huge week. Top 10 in Pakistan for the last few days. Number 5 in Zimbabwe. Number 1 in Benin. How about that then? Not the Benin bronze, the Benin gold. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can also listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. Sammy is on the line in the very, very swing state of Pennsylvania. Let's hear from him. Sammy, how's it going there, do you think?
How you doing, George? Salam alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How do you think the Pennsylvania election's going?
It's heated. We're all nervous here. I myself, I'm an American Palestinian. I'm married to an Indonesian, so she wants to tell your wife Gayatri salam.
How wonderful.
We are both Trump supporters. Yeah, we're both Trump. I've been supporting Trump since 2016, but I didn't vote until 2020. I'm definitely voting on Tuesday. All that being said, any Muslim, any Arab in Pennsylvania, I definitely recommend them to vote for Trump here in Pennsylvania. I would say bluntly that voting for JillStein here is a waste of time. Maybe if you were in California or another state, it would be great. But here in Pennsylvania, if Trump does not win this state, then Kamala will win, and Kamala will take this election. That being said, my real question is, just the other day, Elon Musk reached out to Ron Paul and invited him to the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and Ron Paul responded enthusiastically, I would say. And there was even a few more conversations I saw on X. What would you say to that, and how would that change your view? I know your view, of course, is for JillStein. You would much rather have Trump than Kamala, but maybe in being more enthusiastic and encouraging for a Trump presidency with someone like Ron Paul and obviously Thomas Massey and other people that are on his side. Thank you.
Well, I'm a great admirer of Ron Paul, and I congratulate him on passing the 1 million follower mark on Twitter just a couple of hours ago. I myself, I'm closing in on 750,000, which, given my history with Twitter, which is ongoing, I'm regarding as quite an achievement. I, of course, support an end to the waste of American taxpayers' money on weapons of war and carrying out war and invasion, destruction everywhere. I'm strongly in favor of American money being spent on and in America. But I can't support Donald Trump, and I can't support Elon Musk, and I can't, for that matter, support Ron Paul. I'm a socialist. These people will have common ground with me on many things, and an increasing number of things, particularly the most important thing, which is freedom of speech. Without freedom of speech, without the ability to argue our point of view, then no other progress will be made. It's called the First Amendment for a reason. It's because all the other amendments are dependent upon it. You cannot have a democratic society if you don't have freedom of speech. And to the extent that Donald Trump supports that more than Kamala Harris, well, that's common ground. And I'm always looking for common ground. I'm ready to join with people on common ground. But the kind of society and world that I believe in and have fought for all of my life is fundamentally a different one to that which is exemplified in the figure of Elon Musk, for example, who has made Twitter a more free place, to be sure, but he hasn't made it a free place, as many who've been shadow banned and closed down can testify, and as I myself will testify in the High Court in Dublin against Mr. Musk quite shortly. Sammy, thanks for that call. Matt is in Portland in Oregon. Let's hear from Matt on the U.S. election. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, George. How you doing?
By the grace of God, good, sir.
Yeah, well, I've looked at this way that, see, the Electoral College is what is all you need to put the president in. We don't know nobody can tell you who cast the vote for the Electoral College. And so, and Palantir, they're the weapon, that company runs our government. So who created Palantir in 2000? Peter Thiel. He's working with Trump, and he's going to put him back in the White House, just like when he took him out of the White House because he bragged about destroying Venezuela's economy and stealing the oil from Syria, which Peter Thiel doesn't want anybody in the government to go publicly revealing the crimes our government commits. It's one thing when regular people go out there and talk about what we do, in other countries, but he doesn't want anybody in the government bragging about the crimes we commit. And so he's, and Trump's learned his lesson about bragging about certain things. And so you hear him now, it's like, yeah, he sounds more like what Peter Thiel wants. And I tell people this and they go, no, our voting, we pick the president. No, it's the Electoral College that decides who is the puppet, who will sit in that White House.
How do you think it's going to go, Matt?
Trump's already got the White House because of Peter Thiel, who is running our government right now. And he's the one telling Bibi to go ahead and keep attacking Iran, do all these things because he wants war with Iran. That's why, and give Iran credit for not jumping and just outright just destroying Israel. They're being smart about it. Because this whole thing, if they can destroy Iran, they can control they've already got all the other countries. And they're over there pretty much doing business with Israel, and he doesn't care about it. It's all about controlling the Arab world. And so if he can basically destroy Iran, he has all those countries, he can control them. He can do what he wants. That's why he wants war with Iran. And, so
I wish I was as certain about anything as you are, Matt, about everything. But thanks for the call. Let me tell you that right after this break, we'll be talking to a guest who previously turned out to be one of our most popular from the United States, Hassan Chami, a Lebanese pharmacist, entrepreneur, and activist. And he's quite a talker, I promise you. And he'll be on right after this short break. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, you get that reading of War of the Worlds by me and much other original content if you support the show through my Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. We need your support if we're going to keep 2 shows a week going. And given the size of our audience, it would appear that many people do want us to continue. I had the pleasure of having lunch with Hassan Chami, the Lebanese entrepreneur and activist, just a few weeks ago in London. And then the next thing I saw him was very courageously bearding RFK Jr. on the issue of genocide in Gaza on television. I'm glad he's joined us again now. Hassan, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Let's talk about that first. Your encounter with RFK. How did you get so close, and how did you keep him there so long?
You know, George, thanks for having me again. I missed the day we had lunch. It was a great time. You know, I don't know how I got so close. I was just standing there amongst a couple of my peers, and he walked right in front of us, and I got his attention. And before I got there, I knew the question I was going to ask is about genocide. You know, do you consider this a genocide? And I noticed that I was holding his hand. When I was watching the video, I noticed I was holding his hand for so long, and I guess that's why he just stuck there. He stood there for quite a minute, but I guess he couldn't answer the question. Well,
you do have quite a strong grip, Hassan. You're quite a strong man. He probably couldn't get his hand away.
You know, I'm not sure if you saw that viral clip of him bench pressing with the shirt off a couple years ago, so I think it was a good thing that I tested him a bit to show him, like, you know, there's other men out here.
Exactly. So tell me, what was summarize his reply? Because, you know, a lot of us, me included, would have loved to be able to support an independent presidential run by Robert Kennedy's son. I mean, it's the stuff that dreams are made of. But it became an absolute nightmare when the ugliness of his support for the worst Israelis in the world became more and more obvious, making it impossible. Summarize what he said back to you.
Yeah, he basically said it's not a genocide, it's a war. And so I kept pressing on the indiscriminate bombings and killings of innocent civilians, women, children. And he kept ignoring that. And he said he blames Hamas. And then he tried to bring up the Syrian war. He said, you know, there was like 500,000 or 1 million people dead in Syria. You know, is that a genocide? And I told him, well, the CIA, Mossad funded that for over 10 years. So it's it's quite a different proxy war out there compared to Palestine. And he just refused to answer. He just kept saying it's Hamas's fault, and he does not consider it a genocide.
So Trump and RFK and people who would never normally have got much of an audience in the state of Michigan have been drawing big crowds and have been obtaining endorsement. The mayor of Dearborn, for example, a city we both know and love well, has endorsed Trump. JillStein.
No, that's the mayor of Hamtramck.
Pulling. Okay. JillStein is pulling tons of votes in the Dearborn area and Michigan in general. It seems to me on the face of it that whilst Kamala Harris is murdering the family members of hundreds of thousands of people in the state of Michigan, she can't possibly win it. Is she going to?
You know, right now we don't know, but I do. If you can excuse me, I just do want to clear this up for your audience. The Dearborn mayor, Abdullah Hammoud, has not endorsed anyone. He does not feel comfortable endorsing. He is a Democrat, but he does not feel comfortable endorsing Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. He just wants people to go out and vote their conscience. The Muslim majority city, Hamtramck, their mayor is who endorsed Donald Trump. So just to clear that up. But honestly, to be honest, George, I don't know who's going to win. It's looking like the most recent CARE polling said that majority of Muslims are split between Stein and Harris, and Trump coming in last. But we really don't know until election night. I can't really feel out the vibe in the city. There's a lot of people who don't want to vote. Many people, including myself, are voting JillStein. We're going third party, but we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Is there a big campaign going on? I mean, is it like a kind of general election you might get back in Lebanon? Is there a lot of buzz, a lot of noise? Or are people really not caring who gets it because it might not make any difference at all?
Look, there's a lot of buzz, but there's also a lot of confusion because, again, like every election, it's the lesser of two evils, and this time is during the genocide of our people, right? So there's a lot of people saying, you know what? I don't want to vote because I'm voting for evil regardless. I'm voting when I vote for either Kamala or Donald Trump, I got blood on my hands. And then there's others that are saying, listen, it can't get any worse. Like if you claim that Donald Trump is going to start World War III, you can't say that Kamala Harris isn't going down that path as well with what we've seen over the last year. So there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of noise, a lot of people trying to push people to go third party, go towards Trump. Not too many people are really talking about Kamala Harris. They're actually staying very quiet about it, except one individual in the community. But I guess we're just going to have to find out on Tuesday.
Yeah. Now, I was asking Professor Marandi earlier about things back in your parents' hometown of Lebanon. The danger there is that your ambassador, the American ambassador, is acting like a little Napoleon in Beirut. She's actually giving orders openly, like Victoria Nuland in Kiev. She's ordering Lebanese ministers on what they can do, who they can fly on their airplanes, what kind of aid they can accept from Iraq and elsewhere. Any kickback against that?
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. They're realizing that Israel cannot win the war, and so they're trying to do everything from within with the politicians. And, you know, I just read today that she told them that you cannot fly the injured to different countries to get, you know, to get treatment at different hospitals. To me, it was mind-blowing. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? But what they're trying to do is they're trying to stir up a civil war. They're trying to get the people to go against Hezbollah, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, of course, not for the want of trying, and it has happened before. I'm so old, I lived through the last Lebanese civil war, and a very gruesome thing it was too. It seems to me that if they can't win on the battlefield in the south of Lebanon, and that seems obviously the case now, that all they have left is to foment civil division and even civil war in Beirut and in the north on the foolish sectarian basis that they would actually like Lebanon to be broken up into ethno-religious principalities. You know, a Druze here, a Christian there, a Sunni there, a Shia there. That's the kind of Lebanon they would like.
Yeah, if there's ever time to do it, it's now. They've tried it in the past. It's been successful in the past. Lebanon's very sensitive right now, but we hope that they are not successful with that attempt, but we're going to continue to see it. And we've seen many traitors within Lebanon who I consider Arab Zionists themselves, who are helping push this narrative with their tweets, with what they're saying on their talk shows and whatnot. But we could just pray for, peace. We could pray for, to save the innocent civilians and stop the bombing and the complete destruction of Lebanon. And at the end of the day, it's in God's hands, right? So there's only so much we can do.
Well, lastly, Hassan, you talked about the third-party campaign of Dr. JillStein, who's an old friend of Gayatri and me. We love her dearly. She's done fantastically well. She's the only Jewish candidate in the race, ironically, and she's the only candidate in the race that is unequivocally against the Israeli mass murder of Muslim and Christian kids in Lebanon and in Gaza. How do you assess her campaign, her performances to date?
She's a humanitarian. It doesn't matter if she's Jewish, Muslim, Christian. She stands for what's right. I may disagree with some of her social progressive policies and whatnot, but at the end of the day, Palestine is what's important right now, Palestine and Lebanon. I think she's done a good job Actually, I believe she's done a great job, but it's mostly her voice for Palestine and to end the war and calling it a genocide is what's gained her popularity. So I truly hope that she gets over 5% of the vote on a national scale.
Ameen. Thank you, Hassan Chami, very much indeed for joining us. We look forward to lunch with you again soon, probably in Dearborn. Although, if Kamala Harris wins, I won't be welcome in the United States. Let's take a quick break. Then it's Ali in Canada and Alan in Liverpool. And many more coming up. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world. You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Now scan the QR code right in the center, or in the corner rather, of your screen now, and you can get all of our podcast episodes. If you're a new viewer and you've missed the last 392 episodes of the Mother of All Talk Shows, you can catch up. Who will win, Kamala Harris or Trump? Get voting on our poll. Let's go to Ali in Canada on Palestine and Iran. Ali, welcome to the show.
George, how you doing? You're my hero. You've been my hero for many years. I admire your work.
Thank you.
You're the voice for the voiceless.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to say a couple things I'd like to say. The ambassador to the U.S. is a joke. I don't know why they're giving her a chance to speak. But anyways, I'm a Lebanese. I was born in Canada. I'm a proud Lebanese. I'm a proud Canadian. It's very sad what's going on. And I'd like to say that there's been some stuff circling around on the internet about Azerbaijan and Iran. Iran's very upset with Azerbaijan because when Israel did the attack on Iran, they were using the attack from the Caspian Sea, and Azerbaijan allowed them to do that, which... Go ahead.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, at least 2 of the Israeli missiles came across the Caspian Sea from the direction of Azerbaijan. But that's not the only casus belli, in my opinion, between Iran and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is a key ally of Israel. Imagine, a Shiite Muslim majority country, key ally of Israel, key ally of Erdogan in Turkey, also in many respects an ally of Israel. He's allowing Azerbaijani oil to go across his country of Turkey in a pipeline all the way to the Israeli army depots. Imagine. But there's also the very mysterious helicopter crash which killed the president of Iran and the foreign minister of Iran on his way back from Azerbaijan. So there's a lot of bad feeling between Iran and Azerbaijan, and whatever's going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours between Iran and Israel may also involve Azerbaijan. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I know there's some word that Iran might attack Azerbaijan. I don't know if that's true or not. like, we don't want this war escalating, but, you know, if other figures are starting to, you know, turn their backs and starting to play this card, then what is Iran supposed to do? They have the right to defend themselves, you know what I mean?
Well, Iran has been very clear, Ali, that anybody who participates in any way in attacks on Iran will be regarded as legitimate targets. That goes for Qatar, where the B-52s are waiting on the runway right now, just 200 kilometers from Iran. That goes for other countries that have Israeli ambassadors and the Mossad in their embassies, in their capitals, in Arab capitals. And it has to be true of Azerbaijan also. Last word to you, Ali.
100%. I just want to say that peace in the Middle East, hopefully we can get all this stuff resolved, but without the Zionist entity, there'll never be peace. So God be with you, George, and we'll continue to talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ali. God bless you and yours. That's why I think the statement by Donald Trump that he's ready to go to Tehran in order to negotiate a Middle East peace, the statement by Donald Trump in Michigan today that the Gaza war must end now, that it must stop. These are potentially significant statements. I'd like to see whether he lives up to them. Alan is in Liverpool in England. He wants to talk about Palestine too. Go ahead, Alan.
Yes, well, just one of three brief points, George. In 1977, I was doing the kibbutz thing, and I was in Tel Aviv, and I met an old Jewish Israeli. And he invited me back for a bottle of wine, and he showed me some photographs of him as a very young man with Ben Gurion. And he told me in the midst of this conversation that he was rather worried about the partition plan. And Ben Gurion said to him, "Don't worry, I've only accepted it because I know the Arabs are going to say no." I mention this because I've only ever seen one reference, and it may have been a book by Ilan Pappé, and it's important because it's part of the standard Israeli narrative. The second point I wanted to make was about the D-Day, the British contribution to the Second World War. I don't have to tell you that you know that there was a slight majority of Canadian and British troops over the Americans, that we had rough parity on planes and ships. So the next time you see Tariq Ali, he was promoting his book on Winston Churchill, described the British contribution as a couple of peripheral battles. Please correct him on that point, because it would have infuriated my father. Who was in the
who did that? Who wrote that?
Who actually said that? It was actually Tariq Ali. He was doing an interview about his Churchill.
It's quite wrong. It is quite wrong. It's disparaging. It's insulting. It's insulting to my own grandfathers, both of them. My son and I were watching a World War II documentary just last night and saw the struggle in North Africa of the 8th Army, in which we were the most significant factor. And both of my grandfathers fought there, and one was wounded there. From one end of North Africa, all the way back again, and all the way back again, culminating in the victory in El Alamein. One of my grandfathers took a bullet in the head in that battle. And it was the victory in North Africa which made the assault on Sicily and Italy possible. That is leaving aside the elephant in the room, that if we had surrendered in the summer of 1940, when the European countries had all folded like cheap deck chairs, if we had said, okay, we'll sue for peace with Hitler, then there wouldn't have been a Second World War to win for anybody. Hitler would still be ruling now. I know he only had one ball. He might not have managed to produce a son and heir, but Hitlerism might well be ruling still. Just think about that. Thank you, Alan. Now, again, I say, if you scan the QR code right now, you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Like Tommy Two Gloves, I'm not endorsing either. With Harris, you give up a mile. With Trump, you gain a few inches. Rachel Thompson says Horseface Harris will win because the deep state backs her. And David Marston says Holocaust Harris never won the primary, so why is she a candidate? And Goonie 1972 says, when I see a MAGA hat, here's what I read: make Adolf great again, because the USA thrived on war reparations. And Chris Lothian says, I went for Harris purely because there's no doubt in my mind that the DNC corrupt mafia will try every dirty trick in the book to stop Trump. And if that doesn't work, they'll just invent votes. And Fabi says, gives a $10 donation. I'm very grateful. Is it Fable or Fabi? It's too far away for me to tell, but whoever it is, I'm grateful for your $10 donation. And they say, if Trump wins, I fear the US establishment will utilize the constitutional clause against insurrectionists to prevent Trump from being inaugurated. And Andrew W. says, there's nothing progressive or virtuous about supporting a candidate who is complicit in genocide. No amount of moral contortionism will make it so. Don't succumb to the pressure. Vote your conscience. So you can, as I say, scan the QR code, leave a comment, and we'll read those out that we can. Let's take a call, I hope. Yes, from, is it Bill in Illinois? Bill, are you there? No, we've got Simon first. It wasn't clear that that was a call. Simon from Weaponized News with an update on Iran. Wow, we're waiting with bated breath for that, Simon.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. And I guess I should say to everyone, happy Aban 13 Day, which is November the 3rd on the Persian calendar. And this is the day in which some people remember the exile of Khomeini in 1964, the martyrdom of a group of students protesting against the Pahlavis in 1978. And then, of course, the particularly famous anniversary of the storming of the US embassy by Iranian students in 1979. So if people aren't familiar with that, that is Aban 13. It falls annually in the Western calendar on November the 3rd. So today, now
I'm glad you've explained that. I've been seeing that word on social media without knowing what it meant. So you've educated me, and I hope the rest of the audience. Go on, Simon.
So, with respect to Professor Marandi, there's been another Dr. Karazi, who chairs the Iranian Supreme Council on Foreign Relations, established in 2006 by the current leader, to give him advice on foreign relations. So a very, very significant body on which Ali Shamkhani previously sat. And he gave an interview that was published on their website just a couple of days ago, and also published in Arabic in Al Mayadeen out of Lebanon. And as well as talking about the general situation, he had three very interesting points that I think you'll immediately appreciate. One was he was talking about how Russia, China, and Iran are together forming a new version of the, quote, direct quote, new world order. So he expanded upon that. He said that the agreement with Russia, what's called the Comprehensive Cooperation Agreement, that was supposed to have been signed many months ago, but was delayed after they requested some additional topics to be added to it, and then by the helicopter death of President Raisi. He says that everything is now agreed and that it now encompasses all aspects of the Russia-Iran relationship. So that would indicate that there's going to be some kind of defense or security component to it as well. He acknowledged that it was supposed to have been signed at Kazan, but the delay was because they wanted to make it a very ceremonial bilateral event, and that was going to be scheduled soon. So we have that to look forward to. And the other comment that really struck me was he said the only thing that was stopping Iran from having nuclear weapons was the piece of paper that Ayatollah Khamenei had signed, issuing a fatwa against it. And he said, were that to be changed, that they were immediately ready to assemble the components in order to become a nuclear armed power. So some very, very important points there. The final thing that I'll leave you with is Mr. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, gave a 20-minute or so speech at the Minsk Second Eurasian Security Conference this week. And in it, he talked extensively about the future of Eurasia, President Putin's plan for a greater Eurasian partnership, and also the idea to transform it to include the Eurasian security architecture. So once again, more issues dealing with defense and security. He talked extensively about the relationship with Iran and also with China. And I've narrated that in full in English, and people will be able to find it alongside the Francesca Albanese Human Rights in Palestine report, which was posted just a few hours ago on weaponizednews.com. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you again.
Weaponizednews.com is a go-to for anyone who wants to know what's going on in the world. Thank you, Professor Simon. Bill is in Illinois on the U.S. election. On you go, Bill.
Yes, George. I'm a former Illinois state representative, a 40-year Democratic activist, ran Paul Simon's computer voter files when he was running for president. I've been involved in Iowa for many, many years. I think that and my wife and I know you may not like this idea, but we did vote for Donald Trump because we had to dislodge the establishment. If you don't dislodge the establishment, there is no opportunity for reform. This is what people don't understand. They think that it's the question of the left.
I strongly agree. I strongly agree with that. I couldn't do it myself, vote for Donald Trump, but I'm jolly glad you did, because that's one less vote for one less hope for Kamala Harris to win. I've said repeatedly, over and over again, for a long time now, we must punish the Biden-Harris administration. Whoever you vote for, don't vote to reward the Biden-Harris administration. I'm clear about it, Bill. On you go. Last word to you.
Exactly. It's what if you're a chess player, it's like a queen sacrifice. You have to give up something in order to have a future better opportunity for reform or to win. And that's what defeating Harris and defeating Hillary Clinton, quite frankly, in 2016 gave people an opportunity to promote a reform agenda. And it happened in Illinois.
So how do you think it's going? How do you think it's going to end up, Bill?
I'm kind of 60-40. I think Trump is going to win. I think this Iowa poll that came out, and you may hear about it. You've seen about it. Iowa had been the Democratic primary caucus kind of, and they pushed them out, right? I think this poll has some political, things going on with it.
Looks like a rogue poll to me, or at least a poll conducted by rogues. Thanks, Bill. Let's go to England, where Simi wants to talk about the U.S. election. Simi is in Gosport. Go ahead, Simi.
Hello, George. Yeah, good evening. Yeah, just a quick one. Yeah, I just want to say I found it funny that the Democrats are resorting to their tactics of misquotation. So there's obviously there was a comment that Trump made about Liz Cheney that's been misquoted in a lot of mainstream media. but it's very good that the Americans are pushing back, because I do think a lot of these war hawks and business and political elites should send their children to war instead of the everyday people. And I hope to see similar comments like the one Donald Trump made in England as well, where Liz Truss has repeatedly been pulled on by the mother of Harry Gregg, whose son unfortunately died in Ukraine. So our daughters should also go to Ukraine, I think. So that's the contribution, I guess.
Well, I think that Donald Trump was right in what he said about Cheney. And it's a measure of how grotesque the change in politics in the West, that we're supposed to respect Dick Cheney and his progeny, and we're supposed to recant on what we've said for an entire generation, that if these leaders want to go to war, let them send their own children. Let them go themselves to war. We've all been saying that. And when Trump said it, he was savagely traduced across the very same Western media where these ideas, that kind of statement used to be a commonplace. Simi, thank you for the call. Let's go back to Michigan, where Zobida wants to talk about JillStein. Go ahead, Zobida.
Hi, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, good, thank you. How go things there in Michigan?
Well, this is why I'm calling. Actually, this is the first time that I call or, give my opinion. I'm here in Michigan, and I'm from Damascus, Syria, originally. And I am actually calling. I want to beg everyone from the Middle East, Muslims, Christians, everyone, to go and vote on Tuesday for JillStein. We have to defeat genocide. We have to defeat Kamala Harris in Michigan. This is the first time that our vote, our voice will be heard. We have to let them know that genocide is wrong, that killing women and children in the Middle East is wrong, and there are consequences. Please, everyone who is hearing me in the U.S., please defeat genocide. Please go vote for JillStein. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Zubida in Michigan. Clarion call to all the American Arab, American Muslim communities to get behind the Jewish candidate, JillStein. And they say that Muslims don't like Jews. Jim is in Florida. He wants to talk about the Ukraine. Go ahead, Jim.
Hello, George. I believe we share a birth year and even birth month in common. Don't need to say it exactly, but it was the year that rock and roll began and the Fender Stratocaster guitar came out.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Go ahead, Jim.
My question for you was, have you heard anything more about the, I believe it's now numbered at 58 bioweapons labs?
Jim, hold your phone properly because we're not hearing you.
You hear me now? I was wondering if you could tell me about the 2 or the 38 bioweapons.
No, that's not working. That's not working. Do get back to us, Jim, because the subject that you want to raise is very important. That's a report that Russian troops found 38 bioweapon labs, apparently set up by the US and NATO. Now, you know, I've got another show in the week. It's called Have It Out with Galloway, and that's exactly what you get to do. And your face appears on the video wall. Take a look. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I hope you'll give it a chance if you haven't watched it yet. Have It Out with Galloway. Our guest on Tuesday, the show goes out 7 o'clock, I think, on Tuesday evening. The guest is Professor Seyed Marandi, a longer and deeper interview with him. And it will take place, of course, perhaps after the Iranian response against Israel has been launched. So you don't want to miss that. Have It Out with Galloway. If you want to appear on the show and ask me a question or make a comment, contribution, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. That's the name of the email address. Let's take a call from my own hometown. It's from Duncan in Dundee. Go ahead, Duncan.
Evening, George. Thank you for taking my call. I noticed in your monologue you mentioned the fierce bravery of the Lebanese, and I can agree with that. But I wonder if you'd like to comment on a visit of another fierce patriot to Lebanon last week, Mr. Amos Hochstein. Now, he's visited Lebanon previously, but that was in the IDF as a tank commander. But this time, fortunately, for him, I guess, he's visiting with his diplomatic suit on and he's polished.
He's the
American
special envoy, this time without his tank.
No, but he's a diplomat this time, so we'll maybe give him a second chance. So his previous diplomatic efforts in the Middle East go back to all the way back to Saddam Hussein's Iraq, where he was dispatched to offer Saddam a deal he couldn't refuse. Basically, that America would drop the sanctions in Iraq that had killed 500,000 children if Saddam agreed to take forcibly resettled Palestinians. That deal didn't work, but let's see how his Lebanese deal of last week works, which I basically understand was he was leaning on the Lebanese government to accept a unilateral, not a ceasefire, but, well, basically a unilateral ceasefire, which was a surrender on the Lebanese side. So I'm not sure if the Lebanese have accepted his terms yet, but have you any thoughts on his visit?
Well, first of all, it's grotesque that he should be the American diplomatic envoy. I mean, not since Caligula appointed his horse a proconsul of Rome has there been a more inappropriate appointment than appointing a guy who invaded Lebanon on an Israeli tank as the U.S. diplomatic envoy to Lebanon. As to whether his scheme for surrender will find anybody in Beirut to support it, I don't know. I used to be very close to the domestic, local Lebanese political scene, but I'm not any longer. I haven't been there for some years. I used to go every month. So I don't know what the current runners and riders in Beirut are. The one thing I do know is this: the Lebanese resistance will never surrender. And any politician in Beirut who thinks he can make the Lebanese resistance surrender by him agreeing to that surrender is living in cloud cuckoo land. So I predict that, as in most things, this will all be decided on the battlefield. To the victor, the spoils, as they say. Thank you, Duncan. Karaoke Stars says King Charles and William will receive a sovereign grant which will pay the royal family $132 million next year from us, the taxpayer. And Rafael Rivas Duca says, Mr. Galloway, don't raise your hopes too much on Trump's offer to make peace with Iran. Trump is such a liar as any Democrat, is as much a liar as any Democrat. The deep state, the military-industrial complex, is the one that holds power, not the President of the United States. And Black Sun says the region better stand with Iran. Israel has it in for all of you in the region. And Rabia Burak says traitors are 1,000 times worse than enemies, because an enemy can't harm you without traitors. And Jack Klugman again says, my grandfather was OSS Naval Intelligence behind the lines in Sicily. New York City connects. We all in till Gladio, then kind of disgusted. And Crow says, Azerbaijan is such a disgrace. They are bombing and taking pieces of land back from Armenia. What a hypocrite, just like Turkey. Let's take a call from Canada, from Israr, on the subject of Imran Khan. Go ahead, Israr.
Hey, George. How are you today? It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, good. Thank you.
It's one of the best shows I ever watched. And thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, sir.
In the election buzz, there is another very important, very grave issue going on in Pakistan right now. And that is affecting Pakistan's democratic future and the fundamental rights of its citizens. As you know, your friend, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, has been unjustly imprisoned on what can only be described as trumped-up charges. These charges, as you know, are clearly political in nature, aimed at silencing one of the country's most popular leaders and preventing him from participating in the democratic process. This is not just about one man, George. It's about the very foundations of democracy in Pakistan. A government, as you know, that resorts to imprisoning opposition leaders on frivolous accusations when the military establishment suppresses dissent undermines the will of the people. And, Imran Khan's continued detention, along with mental and psychological torture, shows that certain powerful elements are prioritizing their own interests over the interests of the Pakistani people, while disregarding the rule of law and fair judicial process. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to
there's no doubt at all about that, and we have covered this story comprehensively from the beginning. I'm not a party man of Imran Khan, but I am a supporter of Imran Khan, and he is the rightful Prime Minister of Pakistan. He was overthrown in an American organized coup d'etat in preparation for the great international events that have unfolded since, when he said absolutely not to Western demands, when he said no to Western demands that he break relations with Russia, that he downgrade his relationship with China. He said no. He said absolutely not. And the next thing you know, he's behind bars in a jail cell in one absurd trumped-up charge after another. And quite recently, both his ex-wife, Jemima Khan, and myself, on the same day, without conferring, I have no contact with her, without conferring, we both came to the conclusion that Imran's life was suddenly in real danger. He had been left in the darkness with no light in his cell. His cook had been removed, sent off on holiday. He had no access to his doctor, to his lawyer, to his sisters, to his children, despite court orders on each and every one of those things. And I felt that the scene was being set for the murder, God forbid, of Imran Khan. But in the last few days, those concerns have lifted a little bit. His wife has now been released from prison. His sisters have been released from prison. He's now had a shave for the first time in weeks. His treadmill has been restored to his cell, and works are going on at his home address, leading to some speculation that he will be released from the hellhole of the C-class jail that he's been kept in and put under house arrest, which will still be entirely unjust, but will of course be a little less likely to kill him than being in a darkened cell at the mercy of these jailers. But any attempt to stop Imran Khan from participating in the elections in Pakistan, when he is the choice of the vast majority of Pakistanis and his party is the majority party in the country, would make a mockery of anything called democracy. I hope that the incoming American administration, if it changes, will start to put some pressure on the imported government in Islamabad in this regard. Thank you, Isra, for giving me the opportunity to say that. My good wife is in the hall, indeed in the studio, and joins me now for the social media report. What's rattling, Gayatri?
What an exciting show.
It was,
because the next time I'm sat here, the US will have a new administration. The world will have a new leader.
This or President that, yeah.
President this or President that. Who will win, we're asking. Are the Americans going to have their first black/Asian/woman of color, just like the British have their first? Yeah, there is.
A lot of strange things, like claiming people were her grandmother when they turned out not to be, and all kinds. I mean, America keeps throwing up these conundrums.
The one thing that she hasn't raised...
Where was Barack Obama born? Where was his birth certificate, as they say? Sorry, go on.
No, exactly. And in the case with Kamala Harris, I now discovered that she does have Jamaican roots. I thought she was Indian, even some Jewish roots. But the one thing that hasn't been mentioned this election, or I haven't heard as much, is the Irish. Who is Irish? Who are the Irish going to vote for?
Yeah, well, of course, everybody has to discover some Irish roots. Even Barack Obama claimed to be 1/4 Irish.
Anyway, are the Americans going to go for their first woman of color? Or are we going to have another round of Donald Trump, who's a white, straight man?
Orange. He's orange, rather.
He's very colorful. That's what I wanted to say. He's colorful. So it's going to be very interesting. But David Newman says, what a choice. I blame the Russians. Well, we were at the BRICS conference last week when we heard President Putin responding to the question about his personal relations with Trump. It's all rumor. So it wasn't the Russians who was involved in it. But I did see Putin responding positively to the comments that Trump has made.
On the Ukraine war, yeah.
On the Ukraine war.
He said, we think these promises by Trump are sincere, that his peace plan is feasible, and we support it. That means the war can end on Tuesday if Donald Trump is elected.
Yeah.
This Ukraine war, which has cost 1 million lives and hundreds of billions of dollars, euros and pounds, and caused tyranny to be visited on the populations of Western countries, can be over after Tuesday. I mean, is that not a prize to be grasped?
That's what I'm saying. It's very exciting. Now, speaking of the BRICS, D. by Ochi says, well, nobody wins, no matter the result. We will all lose no matter what. I hope BRICS will teach whoever wins a great lesson on forging alliances and asserting power. And then he makes the comment about ballot paper, ballot boxes, what's going to happen to them. And as the British screenwriter said, Tom Stoppard is his name, it's not the voting that's democracy, it's the counting.
Yeah.
This is going to be the big question, of course. Big question. Do you get my hint? Are you getting my hint?
Aha, question more.
Question.
Well done. I'm glad you pointed it out. That's what done it in 2020. When we went to bed, Donald Trump was in. And when we woke up, Joe Biden was in. And Joe Biden had miraculously got 82 million votes, more votes than anybody ever had polled before. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge here that I can sell you going cheap. But are they going to cheat again? That's the question, isn't it?
Exactly. Can they afford to do so? Matthew White says, I believe it's going to be a very tight outcome. Notwithstanding the MAGA voter base, I think Harris will hoover up several scores of millions of votes from female voters. It's going to be one heck of a week, regardless of who wins. This is going to be the mother of all U.S. elections. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a very bumpy ride. And Joan, very nice. Joan Moore says, in a free and fair election, Trump would win. But I have no expectation that the Dems will let that happen. I wouldn't support either one of them with a gun to my head. As Chris Hedges says, as long as the Democrats and the Republicans remain in power, we Americans are doomed.
Yeah, well, Lenin said of British elections, the only thing certain about British elections is who is going to lose, meaning the working class. And that's been true ever since.
So Ryan in Texas writes, great monologue, George. I support Trump, but not for his policies, but because he weakens U.S. imperialism. During his previous presidency, he was able to pay off NATO, the EU, and other Western leaders, which to me is always a plus. Yes, so it's interesting, isn't it? The commentaries is 50-50, but the poll shows obviously the tendency...
overwhelmingly for Trump, yeah.
For Trump. So maybe one more, which is on Iran, because we had Professor Seyed Marandi on. His name is Gay Riley, also from Texas. He says, Dear George, I don't know much about politics, but I have learned a lot watching MOATS for the last 2 years. I have traveled 25 plus years to Iran to see my family and friends, so I'm familiar with the hearts and minds of Iranians. Now, my question is about the death of President Raisi. What happened? His death seemed too much of a coincidence and a gift to the West.
I believe he was killed by Israel. I think Israel took advantage of the visit to the border, the Iranian-Azeri border, and I think they used the same kind of mechanism that exploded all those pagers in Lebanon. I think they used that mechanism and brought the helicopter down. Nobody will ever persuade me that helicopter crash was everything that it's been said to be.
No, there's no such thing as coincidence. Just
what was it you always say? Coincidences are
just covered clues.
Disguised clues.
Clues in disguise.
Yeah.
There you go.
Now, before I let you go, look at this comment from Abel Malcolm. Gayatri Galloway should take over this show. She's just as intelligent and charismatic as George Galloway, and definitely more beautiful than him. I actually agree with all of that. So I'm out of here. It's been no, seriously. She's better educated than me. She's younger and more energetic than me. Definitely more beautiful and increasingly eloquent. And I'd like her to take me for chips after the show. So over the course of time, not next week or next month or even necessarily next year, we do intend for Gayatri to take a bigger role in the show. And don't forget, I've got 6 children too, so we're not going away. But thanks, Abel Malcolm, I suppose. On line 1 is a legend. It's Norma in Bristol on the Royal documentary. Norma, I was shocked by it. Were you?
Yes, George. Listen, my battery's a bit low, so if my phone goes funny, blame it on the battery. However, what I really wanted to say with our national anthem, because, like you said, it was disgraceful, that Channel 4 documentary. And I mean, Charles and William, they were making millions from the taxpayer and the armed forces, even the National Health Service. And if you think of the words of the national anthem, you know, God save our gracious Queen, King, send him victorious, long to reign over us. Well, no way, don't you think? Let's get rid of it.
No way, Jose. And I had to swear that on the Bible, that I would pledge my allegiance to His Majesty and all of his heirs and successors, even if they turned out to be stark raving bonkers, even if they turned out to be thieves or common criminals. I had to swear my allegiance to them because of their bloodline, and all of that is so absurdly ruritarian foolish and absurd, childlike. I had to swear it, but didn't believe a word of what I was swearing. But I had to do so, or they wouldn't have let me sit in Parliament, even though the people of Rochdale had just elected me. I couldn't go in unless I swore that allegiance. Now, the truth is, Norma, we've got to get this show into the museum, because now we know it's costing us not just what we thought it was costing us, but the royals are making hundreds of millions of pounds off us. We're paying them, we're deferring to them, and they're stealing money off us. The National Health Service, which desperately needs every penny that it got in this budget of Keir Starmer's. Some of that budget is being lifted by the royal family. It's almost impossible to believe, but that's what Channel 4 Dispatches has just proved. The Royal Navy, imagine that. You are my Royal Navy, now give me some money to pay for the Duchy of Cornwall that happens to own the land and the sea and the seabed off the south coast of England. Can you believe it? Tony Benn, God rest his soul, once said, yeah, Norma, I'll let you in last in a minute. Tony Benn, God rest his soul, used to say, do you know how the establishment became the establishment? They killed their rivals. They stole their property and called themselves kings, called themselves the establishment. And yet we've still got people, Norma, who genuflect to them, who tip their hat to them, who regard them as our betters when they are, by most metrics, very clearly our worse, not our betters. Last word to you, Norma.
Well, I haven't really got one except that, you know, the redistribution of wealth in this country, there's got to be a big showdown. It was just, I thought it was appalling what I saw last night. I really did.
I think the whole country is appalled, and more people will watch it when it's chopped up into clips. The viewers of this show already saw the Right Honourable Norman Baker, a Privy Councillor, many times on MOATS, talking about his books on the royals. But now it's broken out into a wider public consciousness. I have a feeling that the Hohenzollerns are in their final days. Years probably, but their final years. When Charles goes, we must have a referendum on whether we want this system to continue. I'm being told in my ear they're not Hohenzollerns, they're Hanoverians, or they're Saxe, Coburg, Gothas, or who cares? They're all, never mind last century, they're really the century before that. Let's have a modern republic in Britain. I've got to go now, Norma, and to all of you, I thank you for watching. A record number of people watched this show this evening. A record number of people phoned this show this evening, and a record number of people will download the podcast of that, I'm perfectly sure. But get this, on Wednesday, we'll know who the President of the United States is, and Iran might well have responded. So you better be here, same time, same place. Good night.